Hi everybody, Barb Stuckey from Mattson here. I'm the President and Chief Innovation Officer. And if you don't know who we are, we're essentially a food and beverage insights, strategy, innovation, and development firm located where San Francisco and Silicon Valley meet. We bring holistic food and beverage thinking to every project we work on. We are driven by strategy, but enabled by insights. We're also bringing technical expertise, creative, concept development, and everything is guided by culinary logic. Our team is made up of 100% employee owners, and it's cross-functional, from strategists to scientists to scale-up specialists. And we help our clients navigate the entire innovation journey, from insights and strategy through inspiration, ideation into creative concept development, and then what we're best known for is for rapid prototyping, formal product development, and taking our clients all the way to market. But we don't have to work with everyone through every single phase. We'll start with where you are now and take you all the way to launch. We work across 100% share of stomach in categories, technologies, need states, you name it. So I'm going to talk to you about 2020 trends. And we got to say it, we are in the middle of a very interesting year, right? So January and February were looking great. The economy was booming. Food and beverage funding was on fire. Everything seemed to be lovely. And then March and beyond has been a bit of a shit show. Sorry, but it just threw everything into disarray. And so what we're going to talk about today are our trends, and I do have 5 areas, but we're also going to talk about the implications of COVID-19. So I'll talk about tech, retail, 3.0, which will make more sense later, water, and CBD. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's just a few that we're watching. To create an exhaustive list of trends would be exhausting. So we're going to start with our first one, which we call high stakes for great fakes. And what does this mean? A great fake is something that tries to be something else. And so we have to start, of course, with plant-based foods. You've all heard about what's going on. 65% of people say they buy plant-based foods for general health benefits, and 48% say because they're better for the environment. But people are starting to question these things, and really, how healthy are they? So, of course, there's going to be the opposition, and there's a company called the Center for Consumer Freedom, and they've put this incredible campaign out there that is meant to fight fake meat. And, of course, what does that mean? Well, it's up to the person and the organization that's considering it. So there's been a bit of a battle between, for example, the lead player, Impossible Foods, and they actually created a commercial in response to the Center for Consumer Freedom, their alleged fake meat campaign. And of course, Pat Brown, the great founder of Impossible Foods, said, "It's a point of pride to have CCS come after us. We can't imagine a stronger endorsement." This is essentially a lobbying organization that works for, guess what, farmers, ranchers, and of course they are in opposition to plant-based foods taking some of the category. But what is happening is that these so-called great fakes are disrupting the categories. And not only are they disrupting, but they're actually calling out the science and the technology in their products, plus the environmental benefits. And this is important. So Atomo is a molecular coffee company. So what is molecular coffee? Well, it's made with not coffee, no beans. So this is a great fake that we think is going to be just take the coffee world by surprise. Then there's Endless West. They make a molecular whiskey. So again, we're starting to see these tech-driven companies come out with alternatives of the real thing that don't use the real thing to get there. And of course, that's been going on in plant-based for quite some time. And we're at the point now where these great fakes, and I say that with loving respect, are so good that sometimes they beat the status quo, whether it's Ripple in beating the status quo with nutrition, or whether it's Right Rice beating the status quo in the rice category with nutrition and convenience. So what does this mean for you watching this presentation? It means that you need to keep an eye out for the great fakes in your category, because if you don't, you're going to end up on the other end of things. The fluid dairy guys didn't watch what was happening with plant-based dairy, and now that's 15% of the fluid dairy category. So keep your eyes open. Our number 2 trend we call low tech for the planet. And again, this is sort of a through line, the environment. So progressive companies like Annie's are starting to think about not just how they source their ingredients and whether their ingredients are sustainable, but they're thinking about whether their ingredient purchases can actually benefit the environment. So do something positive, not just stop the harm to the environment. And this is where regenerative agriculture comes in. And we think it's going to be the next organic. The thing is, it's years and years away. The supply chain just isn't there because it takes a while to create a farming environment that intentionally enhances the soil, which is what regenerative stands for. Cliff Bar, for example, again, another progressive company, these both just happen to be Bay Area companies, say that they encourage their product designers to take into consideration principles of restorative agriculture systems when creating their snacks. These are low-tech solutions. Patagonia has made a business with their Patagonia provisions focused on regenerative ingredients. So why is this important? Well, if you look at the reasons why people buy plant-based foods and great fakes in general, it's definitely about health. It's just better for me. And this is from a longitudinal study that we've been doing for 3 years now. This is just some fresh 2020 data that we released, which shows that while general health benefits are still the #1 reason people choose to eat plant-based foods, those saying that it's better for the environment are increasing 36% from 2 years ago. This shift toward the environment is happening slowly, but all of a sudden it's starting to ramp up. So we're watching it, and you need to be watching it too. Other low tech that's happening out there is taking traditional crop breeding, again, not GMO, but using techniques like advanced screening to identify desirable genetic variation within plant populations. Things that might have taken years, if not decades, to breed are now being sped up by tech. Benson Hill is another company like Arcadia. They're using predictive breeding to improve yield and protein while optimizing environment selection. And Amphora, they are working to create crops that have better nutritional density. So for example, soybeans, we all know that they're high in protein, but what if you could create and breed a soybean that had so much more protein that you didn't even have to extract the protein or isolate the protein? This is what's happening behind the scenes. And then there's what we call middle tech. It's not high tech, it's not low tech, it's just meeting in the middle. And this is about companies like the Bell Group saying that they're going to take conventional farming or dairy, and they're going to combine it with the future of food, which we think is highly driven by plant-based. So they're going to combine dairy and plant-based to make cheese. And this is happening all across the industry in lots of different categories. On the right, you can see here that it's happening with meat, with Applegate and Aidells and Raised and Rooted, and even dairy milk. So this is Dairy Farmers of America. They're blending dairy milk with almond milk to create this meeting in the middle thing, this middle tech thing that we're watching. So what's the impact of COVID-19 on all of this? Well, as we know, it's kind of hard to think about the climate and the environment when we're in the middle of this pandemic. So you're going to see a lot of things that were on the fast track to being commercialized slow down somewhat. And the leader of Earth Day Network says, We encourage people to drive action online rather than in person. So a lot of environmental efforts that are happening out there are somewhat in pause or hold or flux. So what does this mean for you? Well, even if you don't think you're a technology company, you need to think like one. Think low tech, think middle tech. It's how you're going to stay competitive. And then, of course, we have to talk about high tech. And there is such high demand for high tech ingredients. Our third trend. Consumers are looking for all the flavor without all the bad stuff like sugar. And we all know how on trend it is for trying to reduce the sugar while keeping the flavor and the texture and all the sensory elements of food the same. Do Matok is an example of a company that is working on, those are sugar replacers that just bring so much more to the party than the ones that we've been working with in the past. Amyris is another one that's using fermentation to create sweetener replacements. And alternative plant-based ingredients are stepping up because there is so much demand. For example, we know that farmers just can't stop growing soybean or whatever it is they're growing and switch over to yellow peas. And we know how hot pea protein is, and it certainly is growing. But it takes some time. So in that middle period where farmers are ramping up their growth of yellow peas, there's a great shortage. So plant protein sales are growing. We know this. And we know that there's a lot other options out there that are coming right behind peas. We're already working with oat protein and potato protein and pumpkin seed protein and sunflower seed protein. It's out there, not in great supply, but it is out there, and the ingredients are getting better and better every day because there's so much demand for these high-tech ingredients, or low-tech, depending on how you want to talk about them. And then, of course, we have to talk about maybe the most transformational high-tech that will ever hit the food and beverage industry, which is this idea of cultivated meats. And if you look at the icon on the right, essentially this takes the technique of plant cultivation, where you take a cutting of a plant and you put it in a water bath or in an environment like a greenhouse where that plant can grow, and then you harvest it. The same thing is happening with meat. We call it meat cultivation, and it starts the same way. You take a small cutting, a couple of cells from an animal like a cow. You put it into something we call a cultivator, and that's a rich environment for it to multiply, so the cells multiply. And then from there, you can take that tissue and you can turn it into a burger or chicken or other things that we don't even know what they are. So what that results in then is meat without animal slaughter and with lots lower greenhouse gas emissions. Now this too, again, is high tech that is years away from being able to make an impact. But the money is really flowing into this sector. It's incredible how many companies are out there trying to commercialize this technology, with money coming from the Gates Foundation and Khosla Ventures and lots of the big plant-based food funders. We're watching this very closely. So what does this mean for you? It means that if you're thinking about developing plant-based protein products, today you got to have volume and you've got to plan in advance around your supply chain because of the incredible demand that's really putting pressure on the ingredients that we're using today. And you got a novel ingredient like sunflower seed protein, ramp up the development because people are hungry for alternative proteins. Our trend number 4 is called seamless stores, curated experiences. Grocery shopping is in absolute disruption, if you will. And who else would disrupt but the #1 retailer in the world, Amazon? So they have this concept called Go, where you just basically walk in, scan your card, grab what you need off the shelf, and walk out. There is no interaction with people. Think about it, important for this environment where we're currently living. And there's no need to exchange cash or even swipe your credit card on the way out. So this technology, which they call Just Walk Out, is not only going to be used by Amazon in their own stores, but they're going to license this technology to others. So just imagine wherever you go grocery shopping, that someday, and it's not far away, you are going to walk in and just walk out. And that may be enabled by Amazon, but it also may be enabled by the many other companies that are working on this kind of technology. Seamless stores. The other thing we're watching is this idea of curated shopping experiences. So Choice Markets, for example, in the Colorado area, they are creating highly curated inventory that's mostly pulled from local merchants, and everything in the store has a health or mission-driven focus. And this is not a huge grocery store, but it's a convenience store format. So you can quickly get in and get out with things that meet your criteria, assuming that you are the target consumer here. And you may not be the target consumer here at Choice Markets, but there's going to be one of these curated stores for you, depending on what your desires are. They're coming in a big way. Another thing that can help create a seamless experience are robotics. So when robotics started to replace humans, it was mainly driven by a labor shortage. But now all of that has changed with COVID-19. So for transactions to happen between people, again, fraught, and a lot of people are nervous about that. So robotics to the rescue. This is a restaurant in China that has 46 robots on staff to create food and beverage experiences for their guests. And then we've got different changing habits being enabled by a lot of the tech companies. So again, technology driving change here. Uber has announced that they're going to acquire Postmates. Postmates is already working on a delivery robot. And Uber is also working on their own technology using drones to deliver restaurant food and maybe groceries. Oh yeah, Uber has said they're getting into the grocery delivery business. And you know, there are a couple players out there. I happen to be a user of the category, Instacart and Shipt, who will go do your grocery shopping for you, bring it to your house. And this has gotten incredible trial during COVID-19. So in fact, these companies are profitable for the first time. The other thing that we're watching is restaurant delivery. Many of the restaurants that are out there in certain districts are unable to work with indoor dining. So they're really having to rely on off-premise consumption. And what that means is that companies like DoorDash, Postmates, and Grubhub can easily enable that for someone who doesn't have their own delivery. The problem is that these companies charge 20 to 30% of the check, which is just not sustainable for some small independent restaurants. So, of course, there's lots of companies working on this in doing something that allows companies to deliver within their local market at an ethical and fair price. We're also watching what's happening with Center Store. So while people say that Center Store was in decline, we never thought that. We just thought that Center Store was moving to the online to e-commerce. And that does seem to be happening even more so during COVID-19. And you've got some new players which you never would have expected. So PepsiCo, which is a consumer packaged good company, has opened their own e-commerce portal, selling directly from the factory at the Gatorade factory, the Pepsi factory, to consumers. Something that probably never would have happened had it not been for this pandemic. Our fifth trend is plant-based 3.0. And what does 3.0 mean? Well, let's take a trip back in history, and we're going to use burgers as a proxy for the entire plant-based segment. So if you go back to when being a vegetarian just started to come into the general public's consciousness, being vegan was even more out there. But there were products like the Garden Burger that came out to answer that demand. And they were things that had visible vegetables, for example. I mean, it was the Garden Burger after all. It was sold frozen, and it was targeted very tightly against vegetarians and the small vegan population. If we move forward into the 1990s, we had some new players come in like Boca, which might have had some visible vegetables. They also had some that didn't. And so those ones without it were much more meat-like. They were also sold frozen and pretty much targeted to vegetarians. Fast forward to the 2000s, and more recently in the past, you have players like Impossible and Beyond coming in that changed the paradigm in the segment. Now they sell raw, fresh product. It bleeds like beef. It eats and cooks like meat. And most importantly, I think, is that it's sold chilled. So it comes across as fresher. The way that Impossible was developed was to match the nutrition of beef. And because of all the tech and the investment that was necessary, it ends up that these products are more expensive than beef, which is not the plan in the short term, in the long term, but it is in the short term. 3.0 to us is what's happening now for launch in 2021 and beyond. And that is the same raw and fresh products that bleed, that are very meat-like or chicken-like or pork-like, that are sold chilled. But here's what 3.0 really is about. And that means having better nutrition than what we've got today, which is either at parity or in some cases, maybe not at parity. And it's about being cheaper than conventional cattle farming or chicken raising. So this is what is on the horizon. We call it 3.0. And we know that plant-based meat is happening. Of course, I guess you could call this the decade of the plant-based burger. But in 2021, you're going to start to see so much more activity happen. I mentioned earlier that plant-based milk makes up somewhere between 14 and 15% of the whole fluid milk category. Well, if you just take that and you just think about the whole meat category and you look at where plant-based meat is today, it's about 1% of total retail meat sales. So if you start to extrapolate what that means on a larger scale, if we were able to get to that 14 or 15%, that would represent a $12 billion business. So if you think that the plant-based burgers that are out there, if that's as deep as we're going to go, it's not at all the case. It, in fact, is the tip of the iceberg. So we also think that the 3.0, what it brings is this movement away from indulgent to more healthy products. So yes, we started with burgers and sausage links, and then we're moving into fried chicken-like products like patties and nuggets and tenders, ground beef. But if you look at where we're going to get into a place that is less about indulgence and more about everyday consumption. But it's going to require some really novel ingredients. Again, this is kind of where we are today, which is not bad because it takes appealing to a mainstream consumer to get the population moving in the plant-based direction. But these are fried products, right? So how do you deliver something like a grilled chicken breast? Well, this company, Atlas, is making healthier plant-based foods from mushroom roots. And they, like everyone else in the plant-based meat category just about, are starting with an indulgent food to prove to people that this can taste good. So their mycelium, which is the mushroom root, bacon is really unlike any plant-based bacon you've ever had. It cooks like bacon, it tastes like bacon, it smells like bacon. It's made from this whole thing that really behaves like whole muscle meat. So you can see on the right, that could be something that eventually replaces chicken. The other opportunity that's out there in plant-based 3.0 is seafood. So again, if you think about the 14-15% of fluid dairy being plant-based, 1% of all seafood sold is plant-based meat. Plant-based shrimp, plant-based tuna, plant-based whatever, crab, you name it. This is coming in a big way. Also cultivated versions. So what's the impact of COVID-19 been on plant-based consumption and plant-based 3.0? Well, we know that there were some unfortunate events that happened in meat processing plants due to the pandemic and employees getting sick and the plants having to shut down. And the press on it just wasn't really very good. What this press did, though, is in the minds of the mainstream consumer who may not have considered plant-based, all of a sudden it raised some questions about maybe they should think differently. The other thing that happened was that the shortages that were caused by the plant shutdowns means that demand was really high. There were shortages, and of course, what does that cause? That causes prices to go way up. So people on a budget were shifting to something more affordable. And here's an example of something that is more affordable, which I don't know, I have no insider knowledge, but this product was probably sold at a loss, or at very least at very little profit. So this is from Beyond Meat. This is sort of going back to Plant-Based 2.0, where they were selling the product in the frozen case at $1.60 a patty, which is a lot cheaper than their raw, frozen, chilled products. And what they said was it was intended to narrow the price gap between plant-based meat and animal protein. There was also another side effect of this, which is intended to get people to try it. You got to try it to believe it. Our trend 6 is baby food 3.0. And again, we're going to take a trip back into the past of baby food. And if you were feeding a baby in the 1970s up until the 1990s, you were feeding them out of jars, pretty much. And mostly glass jars. A lot of these products had lots of sugar and salt added to make it more palatable, so you didn't have to fight the baby. Most of the varieties were fruit or meat, chicken based. And eventually the products evolved into natural and organic varieties. But still, mom had to do all the work. You got to sit down, you got to open the top, you got to have a spoon ready, you got to put it in the baby's mouth. Come the turn of the century, and we've got this incredible innovation of putting baby food in a pouch. Kids can open it themselves, they can squeeze it into their mouth. All of a sudden, the kid is doing the work, which means that mom can be driving and baby can be feeding themselves in the back seat. And then, of course, the flexible pouch is so convenient and not prone to breaking like glass that mom can throw it in her purse and be on her way. Baby food 3.0, we're watching very closely because it's just starting today. So it's not even to the point where plant-based 2.0 is. But it's new technology, new food, and new temperature states. So if we look at a great technology that really has struggled to find its application, and that is high-pressure pasteurization. So on the left, you can see here that Evolution Fresh, which used to be owned by Starbucks, is a brand that did a really good job in applying high-pressure pasteurization to things that didn't process well otherwise. Things like green vegetables. You process pasteurized green vegetables and you get that sort of army green, canned green bean color. HPP delivers fresh flavors, fresh green color. So wouldn't that be amazing to feed babies food that feels fresh, that tastes fresh? So Once Upon a Farm is a company that said, we're going to use this technology to make baby food. Lock in the nutrients, taste, and texture of farm fresh organic ingredients so they're safe for your little ones. This is just one company in baby food 3.0. Cerebelli is another one. And what they're doing here is delivering custom nutrition based on key developmental windows for kids. So babies' brains are developing, and at each stage of the development of the brain, the nutrients that are necessary to fuel the development and the growth are different. So Cerebelli delivers a direct-to-consumer model that tracks with your child's progression and delivers the nutrients in the food that they're eating along the way. It's an awesome use of fortification and direct-to-consumer, and of course leveraging the pouch that's already out there to do something that's really different. And then there's little gourmets, who I'm very fond of because having written a book about the science of taste, I know that kids learn to accept foods not just when they're babies, but when they're in utero. So when they come out and they are fully formed human beings, they are going to reject things that they haven't had in utero. So this is one way to get young children to start accepting vegetables, to start accepting spices and herbs. It's basically baby food that tastes like adult food. So you've got varieties like Spanish corn and bean gazpacho, coconut cauliflower mash, Moroccan butternut squash, Moroccan spices for babies. So it cultivates a curiosity of flavors and cultures. So building that open-mindedness into your children through the food that you're feeding them. And we know that these things are appealing to millennials. The other thing that is appealing to millennials is that they're trying to teach their kids that the way we eat has an effect on the environment. So the kids that are growing up with these baby food 3.0 products are going to be completely different consumers than what we know today. So we've got to be ready for them. And our last trend that we're tracking actively is water 3.0. As you can see, we love this. Oh, not the last trend. We love this 3.0 analogy. And water is problematic if we talk about delivering consumer packaged versions of water. We know that millennials, again, an important consumer group, they want food and beverage to be packaged in sustainable ways. 64% are willing to pay more for eco-friendly products. And so that water bottle that comes in plastic with, all of the baggage that comes with plastic bottles has now segued into, I guess I'm a case study here, even though I'm not a millennial, the hydro flask. Some of these things cost $30. But what they are is they're a badge. They're saying to everyone else, hey, not only am I smart and stylish, but I'm interested in saving the world. They have become a status symbol. So that means that you are aware of the environment and you have taken action. Very important to millennials. This is another great water concept. So you can go to the San Jose airport in the Bay Area and you can vend yourself some water. And what it will do is it will put the water into a paper bottle that is 100% compostable. And I love this. It's designed not to last. So these bottles are collapsible, so they take up very little space. They're compostable. And because they're collapsible, they're shipped empty, and the vending machine is plumbed into a water line. And so, very, very little solid waste and space that they take up. It's really the rise of the water vending machine. Who would have thought we'd be vending, meaning selling water? So Bevy is another one of these concepts. They sell a smart water machine, and you can make customizable drinks here. You can get plain water from it, the sparkling still water, but you can also get flavored waters on demand. So just push the interface. It's the Internet of Things connected, and so when the machine needs servicing, it notifies Bevy, and somebody comes out to service it. You don't even need to report that there's some problems with it. Bevy will know. And if we talk about the impact of COVID-19, of course, there is the next evolution of some of these vending machines, which is touchless dispensing. So no longer do you have to touch that interface, which might be a computer screen, it might be a button, but this is completely touchless, and Bevy has already gone there, thinking ahead. The impact of COVID-19 has also impacted your favorite sparkling beverage of choice. So we know that people are not commuting to work and that they're just not going as many places as they used to, using cars and airplanes, which means that fuel use is down, which means that ethanol is down. And when you extract ethanol, you've got carbon dioxide that comes as a byproduct. So that carbon dioxide is then sold, but if there's less ethanol being processed, then there's less carbon dioxide. And so what that means is that the price of CO2 has been going up. And that's been impacting brewers who in some cases are paying 25% more for the bubbles that they're putting into their beer. So beer, soda, seltzer, it's impacting multiple categories. And lastly, CBDs Foggy Future. So I'm going to not just launch into this, but I'm going to start with the reality of what is CBD. I'm sure you've heard of marijuana or cannabis, but do you know the difference between cannabis and hemp? So very quickly, they're the same plant, the same species of plant, cannabis sativa. Same, end of story. The difference is in how they're bred. So if you think about how you garden, right? If you cultivate cannabis, you are cultivating high levels of THC in your product. And the THC is what makes you high. If you're cultivating hemp, you are developing something that doesn't have the THC. In fact, by law, to be called hemp, it has to be 0.3% or less. And because there's so little THC, it doesn't get you high. So, and by the way, this has been happening over decades and decades and decades as cannabis users have wanted product that had higher and higher and higher THC levels. Where we're now going is into hemp, and we're saying, hey, wait a second, this plant, it doesn't have to get you high to have some functional benefits. And that's what hemp is, and that's where CBD comes from, just to be clear. So we're taking this CBD, this stuff that doesn't get you high, but supposedly provides all of the health benefits of cannabis, and we're putting it into food and beverage products. At least we were. And then the local, state, and federal jurisdictions kind of got wind of things and said, we just don't know enough about this product. So today there's only 16 states that explicitly allow it. Now, does that mean that people aren't doing it? No, it's available everywhere. It just means that there is a sort of scary or in some cases unknown regulatory environment and implications for your product. Only 32% of states actually allowing it. So FDA still maintains its stance that CBD is not okay for use in food and beverage. So they've said that they're working on providing regulatory clarity, and Mattson, at least for us, until FDA does come out and have more of a positive stance and perception of CBD, we're waiting it out. It could take years and years and years, though, although the 2021 budget proposal from FDA shows that they are making cannabis and CBD a priority. So hopefully we will see some action in this space between now and next year. There might be a quicker path, though, than marketing a product as a food or beverage. And the quicker path might be to market your product as a supplement. So that will require that people are doing this in a respectful and a safe way. And what safe means is that they should have warnings on the label that this product is potentially not safe for sensitive populations like pregnant women or children. They need to indicate a serving size for the amount of CBD that you're ingesting on everything that you're ingesting so as not to quote unquote overdose, because we don't really know what that means. And then they have to comply with post-market surveillance. to capture potential unknown adverse effects. As I said, we don't really know what it means to have something with CBD for breakfast and then a snack with CBD in the middle of the day and then take CBD for sleep later at night. We just don't know. So while we think that supplements will be allowed first, they still really have to operate within some sort of regulatory environment. So brands could reposition themselves if they're already on the market as dietary supplements, which a lot of the big CBD brands have started to do, like Weller, a ready-to-drink beverage, Life Aid, for example. You'll see supplement facts on these products instead of nutrition facts panels. And unfortunately, like everything else, CBD has been impacted by COVID-19. So there has been very little movement on FDA. Like we said, we hope that changes in 2021 with more budgetary allowance. But also things like the CBD Global Summit have been canceled, unfortunately. So we have to wait. And so this is why we're calling it CBD's foggy future. We don't know what's going to come out of FDA, and they could come out and say no. So all of these products on the market will be breaking the law. Again, we just don't know. So we do know, however, that people are out there looking for functional foods, especially wellness and especially immunity and the things that you would expect when people are worried about getting sick. So just to be clear, I want to state it, as did the Association for the Cannabinoid Industry. There is absolutely no evidence that CBD can play any role in altering the course of coronavirus diseases. And unfortunately, this is also the fact with CBD having absolutely no evidence for providing any role in any disease or any case. There is anecdotal evidence that CBD helps, for example, for sleep, but no published studies to date have gotten there and been able to prove that. So I'm going to wrap up here. We've got a couple of other trends that we are watching, but to summarize the 8 that I just took you through very quickly today, high stakes for great fakes, and we say that with loving respect. A great fake is something that could change the world. Number 2 is high and low tech for the planet. Number 3 is high demand for high-tech ingredients. Number 4 is seamless stores, curated experiences. Number 5 is plant-based 3.0. Number 6 is baby food 3.0. Number 7, water 3.0. And number 8, CBD's foggy future. And these are the other ones we're watching that have really come to the top of our list since COVID-19. One is the rise of individual servings in social occasions, from restaurants, at the grocery store. Of course, people want to know that their foods and beverages are safe and that other people haven't touched them, meaning wherever they're touched along the path to market. Number 2 is an increase in preferences for grab-and-go meals. Again, that gets back to the individual servings versus things like salad bars or soup bars, or even restaurants preparing food for takeout and delivery. Products that are made in a centralized location or commissary where there's safety control and quality control are we think, going to drive grab and go. Number 3 is cooking fatigue. Consumers are really looking for new experiences at home. This has driven the growth of meal kits, which were really sort of struggling on their last gasp, and people are just looking for new experiences in any way, shape, or form at home. So that is driven by cooking fatigue. I know that I have it. New occasions that are related to working from home. So, for example, you're working from home. You're not eating breakfast at the office anymore. So who's to say, why not? Ice cream for breakfast, mac and cheese for breakfast, which incidentally Kraft is now promoting. Number 5 is the continued growth of vice. Again, you're at home. You can't go out and celebrate. There's not a lot of things that you can do for entertainment. So alcohol consumption, sugar consumption, carb consumption, these things that we think of as vice are way up. And lastly, big brand resurgence. Once again, these older brands that maybe the younger millennials and Gen Y or Gen Z consumers hadn't really experienced before, they're now experiencing them for the first time. And for those of us, Gen X and later, we went back to the brands that we grew up with as kids because they provided some sense of comfort. So I would just like to say thank you for this ability to talk about trends. Mattson is out there to make a difference in the world in the products that we're creating and putting on the market. If you're interested in having us present this to your innovation team, feel free to reach out to me, barb@mattsonco.com. We'd love to talk to you. And with that, Barb Stuckey, President and Chief Innovation Officer at Mattson. I am wrapping things up, and I just want to say thank you and stay safe.